The generative AI world is barely recognizable from where it was when I started this everyday AI show more than 2 years ago. And as we celebrate our 500th episode, wow, that's crazy. But yeah, as we celebrate our 500th episode, uh, you all thought it would be a good idea to talk about some of the top takeaways from everyday AI so far. So I'm excited to share about that today and talk about some of the, future of work discussions, how AI is going to be impacting and is already impacting employment, how it's going to change traditional service industries, and even redefining our own human skill and value. So I'm excited today to talk about the top takeaways of everyday AI so far as we celebrate our 500th episode. All right, what's going on, y'all? My name's Jordan Wilson, and I'm the host of Everyday AI. This is your daily live stream podcast and free daily newsletter, helping us all not just learn AI, but how we can leverage generative AI to grow our companies and our careers. So, is that what you're trying to do? If so, you're definitely in the right place. It starts here with our daily live stream and podcast, but how you actually leverage this and take advantage of all of this is by going actually to our website, youreverydayai.com. There you can sign up for our free daily newsletter where we not just recap every day's show, but keep you up to date with everything else happening in the world of generative AI, large language models that day. So if you haven't already, you need to go read our free daily newsletter. Speaking of our free daily newsletter, well, if you're looking for the daily news, it'll be in there. But in our newsletter, we asked you, said, hey, what do you want to know? Right? We can do a lot of different things for a 500th episode. I asked you all, hey, do you want former guests to interview me? Should the live stream audience just grill me? Do you want to hear about some of my favorite episodes? But no, you all wanted, by a far margin, you wanted to hear the top takeaways of everyday AI so far, which is kind of broad. So I just put together a lot of my different thoughts. But ultimately, this is about you all, right? So first of all, yeah, maybe you don't know. Maybe you just listen on the podcast. Maybe, you don't listen too much to the show at all. Maybe today's your first time. But what this thing ultimately is, it's for you all, right? And I'm going to get into that a little bit more, but I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to hear, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have comments, please get them in. Jay saying, what a great milestone, 500 episodes. Congrats, Jordan, and thanks for all you do for us. Absolutely, Jay. It's fun. All right, we're going to try this again, y'all. Live stream audience, if you could, let me know. Can you hear me? You can probably tell I'm in a different place today. So I'm actually at the Google Cloud Next conference in Las Vegas. So yeah, hotel Wi-Fi, absolutely terrible. So it might be cutting in and out. I also just jumped over to actually now running this show on my spots. So fun. So yeah, if you could let me know if you can hear, that would be great. All right, good. I'm back. Yeah. It's one of the fun things, I guess, about everyday AI. Stuff goes wrong, and this is unedited, It's unscripted. It's the realest thing in artificial intelligence, right? Because the realest thing in life is like, hey, when you're at a conference, the Wi-Fi stinks. So such is life. Yeah. Or maybe, Dr. Harvey Castro said, the AI gods fighting us. Yeah. So yeah, anyways, if this cut out, this is our 500th episode. Happy, I have a lot of stuff planned that I want to talk about, but mainly I do just want to hear from you all. If you do have questions, whether about AI, obviously, if you want to ask me something personally, sure. I'll try to answer as much as I can, whatever you want to know. But I do have some of my top takeaways from 500 shows. Yeah, hot spot for the win. We'll see about that, Douglas. We'll see if the hotspot can keep up with this. So let's get going. Hey, Brian Felt says congrats on the 500th. Thanks, Brian. Good lifelong college friend and roommate right there. And Brian's got a great AI podcast now too. So love to see it. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk about our biggest takeaways. So first, it's unrecognizable, right? AI today is unrecognizable from where it was when I started the Everyday AI show more than 2 years ago. Right at that time, ChatGPT was out, but that was it, right? For the most part, yes, ChatGPT had just kind of gone viral, and everyone was talking about it, and everyone was using it, and everyone was kind of confused. But that was really it, right? So I believe I started this show. Oh yeah, I'm looking at I think it was April. So yeah, just over 2 years ago. Generative AI was an afterthought, right? Like people weren't talking about it. It wasn't integrated into how we work. It's obviously completely different now. You can't go into any enterprise company and not, and they don't have a generative AI plan. Every single enterprise company has a generative AI plan. It's obviously evolving. Not everyone has it figured out, right? Very few people actually do, just because of the speed of developments. But it's completely different now, right? You have every single big player in the game right now. But even before we get into that, I should probably start it where this started, right? So yes, more than 2 years ago, I've maybe told the story once or twice, but not in a lot of depth. And maybe if I tell that story, maybe this will make sense, and maybe this will resonate a little bit more. So I was a writer. I was a journalist, right? In a former life. So I spent about 7 years as a multimedia journalist. Then I spent almost a decade, 9.5 years in nonprofit leadership, but we just really became an activation agency for Nike and Jordan brand. And then I started my own company called Accelerant Agency. So I remember very vividly, as soon as the GPT technology came out in late 2020, so this is 2 years before ChatGPT, I was using it every day. The day it came out, right? All these third parties, there's, I don't know, Copy AI, Jasper, a bunch of other ones. The day these pieces of software came out, I started using them heavily. And my agency, all of our team started using it as well. And, at first it was helpful, but then I learned, the more I understand about the technology, the more I work with it, the more I learn how to apply it to the work that we were doing at the time. It wasn't just the more impactful it was, but I realized that, wait, I've been getting paid to write for 20 years. I did okay in my early journalism days. I won a Pulitzer Fellowship, ACP Story of the Year. So I did okay, in my early days as a journalist. But there's a point where I'm like, wait, this AI tool is better than me at writing. And that was weird. It was a hard kind of conversation to have with myself. But that really made me open my eyes to what generative AI is capable of, right? And again, this is 2 years before ChatGPT. So in that 2 years, I was using and trying every single generative AI tool that was out. And I wanted to learn more. So I tried to gobble up all the information there was online about, this GPT technology, and there wasn't a lot. And, we also had some early diffusion models, on the image side. And I realized that any information out there, it was super technical. I didn't understand it. It was almost like showing up to a party that you weren't invited for. That's what it was like for me, back in 2020, 2021, trying to learn generative AI. And I'm like, this stinks. I knew how transformative this technology was, but I couldn't find any good place, any good avenue to learn. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to start it eventually, right? At the time I was having one of my best months, one of my best seasons ever at Accelerant Agency. We had a nice little team, uh, good clients, from a business perspective. Like when I had that epiphany, it was the best month I had ever done in my company. But at that point, I made a decision. I said, I have to slowly shut this thing down. It took longer than I would have wanted to in order to be able to do this everyday AI thing daily, right? It took like a year and a half to kind of wind things down. We had a lot of clients, right? We signed very long-term contracts with clients, sometimes 12 to 18 months. So it took a long time to kind of quote unquote wind, that business down so I could focus on everyday AI. And it actually started in the car. Um, I'd been thinking about it for a very long time. And I was actually driving to a friend's wedding with my wife and one of my good friends, Kenny, and I told them about this idea. And so we kind of spitballed it on the way, and I think both of them told me, like, this sounds like a good idea, but are you sure about doing it every single day? And I don't know. I made that decision back then, and maybe you've come to this realization too, that unless I was practicing every single day generative AI, unless I was learning about it, I felt like I was going to get left behind, right? And don't get me wrong, even though I spend the majority of my days now doing that exact same thing, right? Like getting to talk with some brilliant people here at the Google Cloud Next conference and learning from literally the smartest people in the world. But I still feel that way, right? I still feel like, man, it's so hard to keep up with what's possible now and how we work. So that's kind of how this thing started. If I'm being honest, I didn't think that the podcast would turn into what it's turned into. Mainly, I started the podcast because I'm like, I'm a writer and I'm going to write a daily newsletter. And, I want exclusive content in the daily newsletter because there was, a handful of good, daily AI newsletters at the time, but they were all the exact same. I'm talking copy and paste, right? They covered the same things. They talked about the same things. It was formatted in the same way. I'm like, I want to do something different. So in my newsletter, I want to be able to talk to smart people, right? Bringing in my old, journalism days, I guess. And each day I want to write like I used to, right? For me, writing is important. I still write, the leverage portion of the newsletter with these fat fingers, with my own two hands. I don't hand it off to generative AI, which, by the way, I was using M dashes way before generative AI. Brian can probably attest to that, right? Brian, tell him, use the M dashes way back in the daily Egyptian days. So I thought actually that the podcast was just going to be so I can create fresh daily content for the newsletter, but it was actually, the podcast that, got kind of popular, and not the newsletter, but that's okay, right? In business, as with anything else, you have to be adaptable, you have to be flexible. So that's kind of the genesis of everyday AI. And it's much different now, right? Doing this every single day and being able to work with literally the biggest companies in the world. I'm very fortunate. And I hope that, this journey over 500 episodes, I hope you found a little bit of value here. Here we go. Okay. Brian's saying this. He said, I distinctly remember Jordan telling me about Jasper AI 6-ish months before ChatGPT came out and telling me AI was the future. Looking back at it, it was a clear inflection point for me using AI tools on the regular, as he was usually ahead of the curve. In this case, the AI boom, boom. Yeah. All right, let's keep going. Let's talk a little bit about the future of work. And y'all, if you do have questions, I'd love to tackle some of your questions. Kind of as we go along. As I'm seeing some of them, I'm starring them. I'm going to get to them. So thank you for all the congratulations comments. But But yeah, if you have a question you want me to tackle, please let me know. It is like 5:45 a.m. in where am I? Vegas. I got nowhere to be. All right, but I'm not going to keep this one going on for too long. So let's just quickly talk about, like when it comes to top takeaways of 500 episodes. I mean, the biggest one has to just be the future of work. I've been saying this for a long time. I didn't say this day one, right? Because this was before every single, big player was involved. So now, Microsoft with their Copilot, amazing, and all the updates that they just announced over the last 2 weeks. Google, obviously, right? Meta pivoted from, at the time they were, social media company. Now I think most people know Meta as an AI company. And then you have every single, even legacy tech company has transformed in the last, 4 to 5 years since the GPT technology kind of hit the scene. So, everyone from, IBM and Intel and Oracle and Dell and Salesforce, Adobe, right? I just saw, Bank of America just invested $4 billion into their AI efforts, right? So every single big enterprise tech company, everyone's turning into an AI company. So if you don't think yet that generative AI is the future of work, I mean, probably if you're listening or, reading this, you probably know and you probably understand that, but that's the biggest takeaway is I was having a conversation with someone at Google last night about this very thing. I don't think that we're going to have a choice soon to not use AI, right? You'll have to kind of go out of your way soon, right? Obviously, all the enterprise software that we use is being, infiltrated in a good way with generative AI, with large language models, right? So if you're a Microsoft Windows organization, obviously with Copilot, Apple is like, 30 years behind, but I think eventually Apple Intelligence will be able to do more than, add 2 plus 2. And obviously everything with Google, right? So most people, you're either a Google or a Microsoft organization, and those two companies have obviously been huge leaders in the space, along with OpenAI, with NVIDIA, really going from a company no one had heard of. If you weren't a gamer, you didn't know what NVIDIA was like 3 or 4 months or 3 or 4 years ago. Right now, NVIDIA, depending on when you look, they're the biggest company in the world when it comes to market cap, or, at least a global superpower, literally driving the future of the economy. So generative AI is the future of work. So anyways, what I was saying in this conversation last night is I think it's going to be very hard for us not to work with AI soon. Because I think that even everyday non-technical people are starting to see the benefit of generative AI. A funny story here. I'll share another personal story. My wife, she's amazing. She listens to every single episode. She's taken like my prime prompt polish course a lot of times, and she's trying to help me improve and all these things. And funny enough, right, even though I talk about generative AI every single day, it was when I was at the NVIDIA GTC conference 2 weeks ago, and I came back and she had replaced her searching of Google with, now she's just talking with Perplexity, right? And I was joking about it, and I'm like, oh, you decided to take the time when I was gone for a couple of days to start using generative AI in your day to day. But I'm starting to see this shift. Another one of my good friends, his fiance, same thing. She's like, hey, now I'm using ChatGPT for everything, but she's not, a technical person. I am now seeing non-technical people, start using this generative AI technology that I think a lot of us, if you are a more avid, maybe listener of this show, or if you're, someone that's using AI every single day, I think we've been in this bubble sometimes, and I forget that. But now I think that the average, even non-technical person is starting to see huge value from using AI, right? Not just in time savings, but in the quality of outputs, right? So generative AI is the future of work, and it's going to be very hard in the future to do any work without using generative AI. Just like right now, it's pretty much impossible to complete any work of real business value without being connected to the internet, right? I think the same thing. And as we talk about generative AI and models getting smaller, better, edge AI, right? Like right now on this iPhone here, right? There's technically a small language model because I have the newer iPhone, but I would assume in 2 to 3 years, on the average smartphone, we are going to have a model that lives locally that is more powerful than today's state-of-the-art model, right? Yeah, it might not be Apple first. You might have to have a Google phone or something like that. But I do believe that we are going to have in 2 to 3 years a local model running on the average smartphone that is more powerful than a GPT-4o, as an example. So even your personal life, your work life, you have to understand generative AI is the future of work. There's no way around it. And that's both good and bad because it changes how we work. And I'm going to get to that a little bit later when I talk about agency and when I talk about human skills and human value. Yeah, like, Monica here says, looking forward to using agents at work one day. I think that one day is coming for people much quickly than we all may realize. All right, let's get on to my next big point, right? Because we talked about big tech's all in pivot, right? Which I've mentioned a couple of times on the show before, but this is the first time in US history when you look at the economics of work, right? And that's something I always do. Yes, I know on this podcast live stream, I ramble and sometimes I seem a little disorganized, but I promise you, I do a lot of research, right? But I don't know. I don't want this show either to come off as overly prepared because there's enough things out there, and those all sound robotic if I'm being honest, right? So, anyways, I've talked about it once or twice on the show before, but talking about this big tech's all-in pivot to everything AI. Never in the history of the US have all 6 of the biggest companies, when it comes to market cap, been from the same industry until now, right? It's always been, very, very diverse. You have people in energy, your mobiles, you have people in commerce, your Walmarts of the world, right? So if you go back and look over the last, 30, 40 years at the biggest companies in the US by market cap, it's always been very diversified. It's not anymore, right? Which, there's downsides to that as well. But the 6 biggest companies in the US when it comes to market cap, they're all just now AI companies. Microsoft is an AI company. Google is an AI company. Amazon is an AI company. NVIDIA is an AI company. Meta is an AI company, right? You get the picture. And they're the biggest companies in the world. And that's really impacting not just employment, but also business models, right? I don't know how to say this. AI is going to take a lot of jobs, right? I've never been one to beat around the bush. I've said since the very first episode of Everyday AI, which is a little bit it's a little cringe if you want to go back and listen to it, but I still think a lot of the first points that I made hold true today. AI is going to take a lot of jobs. AI is going to have a net negative impact on traditional full-time US employment. All right, let me say that again. AI will ultimately have a net negative impact on traditional full-time US employment. Let me unwrap that. I think employment is going to change very much because at least, especially for the last, since the digital revolution over the last, 30-ish years, we sit in front of computers, right? Since the 90s, you sit in front of computers and you're paid for your knowledge, right? You're paid to create business value. You sit in front of a computer. You create new business value for a company with your knowledge, right? That's what we do as knowledge workers. Knowledge work is going to completely change. Because guess what's more knowledgeable than all of us sitting in front of a computer? A large language model, right? Go use, Gemini 2.5. Go use, OpenAI's O1 Pro. You could get, and I don't care who argues on the contrary, right? If you argue the flip side, that just makes you not smart, right? To think that, or to not understand that a single AI system is exponentially more intelligent than the world's smartest humans. Going back to my story, right? When I was using these tools and I'm like, they're a better writer than me. Everyone, if you haven't had that moment yet, you're going to have that moment, right? Where, oh my gosh, this AI is better than me. And that's okay, right? Like, I think if you ask the same conversation, 10 years ago, hey, are you smarter, or is the collective information on the internet smarter? I think most people will say, well, the collective information on the internet. Okay, that's what large language models are. They are literally a collection of the best intelligence, hopefully the best intelligence on the internet. Yes, large language models hallucinate. Yes, large language models can go off the rack, off the rails, right? Humans can too. It's always funny when people look at these benchmarks and they're like, oh, well, looks like it only got it right 93% of the time. So we need humans. It's like, okay, let's have a single human take that benchmark, right? Let's have a single human take the MMMU or the MMLU or the ARC-AGI test. The smartest human I know is going to get about 0 correct. So think about that. But let's talk a little bit about business models and how that's going to change. Well, I think traditional full-time employment as we know it is going to look very different, especially here in the US. It's going to look different in other parts of the world. But here in the US, where the majority of our listeners are from, think of it like this. You know how a lot of people now, there's this gig economy. You have people. It's not uncommon for someone, especially in a bigger city, I think, to be full-time gig economy, right? They're, I do a little DoorDash, I do some Uber, and then I do some TaskRabbit, maybe. I don't know, right? It's not uncommon, especially in bigger cities. That's what's going to happen with professional services. That's what's going to happen with knowledge workers. I'm not saying that no one's going to have a full-time job in 5 years. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying it will be common to know professionally educated people who have been in corporate America and leave, and then they just have essentially the equivalent, right, of knowledge work-based jobs. So think like, kind of Fiverr/Upwork, but think if there was, for whatever your industry is, let's say you work in marketing in the logistics industry. Okay. There's going to be like 50 different Uber-esque, or Fiverr-esque or Upwork-esque services just for marketing in the logistics industry, right? It's going to be very common in 5 years for the average American worker to have multiple jobs, to have multiple, I think even businesses, multiple side hustles, right? But I really think we are going to see this reemergence of entrepreneurship. And unfortunately, I think that's going to follow mass layoffs, right? We're already starting to see it, because when you talk about AI's impact on employment and traditional business models, right? Most enterprises, not all of them, there's still some, and I hope there's many enterprises that when they see and fully realize the gains of generative AI, that they'll make good ethical decisions, right? That's why AI ethics is good. That's why I've, for literally a year and a half, when I tell people and when companies hire me to consult for them on AI implementation and strategy, I say, you need to go solve for the why and solve for the what happens when, right? What happens when you become 50% more productive, right? Yes, you have to train your people, which no one wants to train their people. Everyone just wants to hand out easy buttons. That's not how generative AI works. But what happens if you roll out generative AI the correct way? What happens if you invest in training and unlearning? That's what I say. We need to stop with this upskilling, reskilling. It's unlearning and relearning. That's what we need to do. But what happens if you're an organization of 5,000 people and you go through that process and you see 50% gains? What happens when AI works? What are you going to do? You're going to go to 4-day work weeks, keep everyone on board? Are you just not going to hire new people? Or are you going to lay off 30% of your organization? I think, unfortunately, a lot of especially public companies are going to do the latter in that scenario. They're going to lay off a lot of people. Well, number one, they're going to stop hiring, especially as we get this. I think now's a good time or bad time, depending on how you look at it. But it's a convergence of all these things happening, right? So we finally have large language models that are agentic, right? They're able to, on their own, no code, right? That's the thing people don't realize. And there's some announcements. I should have wrote down what time the embargo here at Google goes away. I think it's maybe still, might be 30 minutes. So I can't talk about it, but okay. Microsoft Copilot Studio. If your organization has Microsoft Copilot set up correctly, even if you are not a technical person, you can go into Microsoft Copilot Studio. You could probably spend an hour. It's no code, low code, and you could probably build an autonomous agent that does one of your most annoying manual tasks without any experience. You could probably get it doing 80% of that one task autonomously, right? So when we talk about autonomous agents and how they're going, and people are always a little bit confused, and I get it, right? Essentially, you have you have generative AI or large language models, right? I talk to ChatGPT. ChatGPT gives me answers back. Then you have AI workflows, right? Which is I talk to ChatGPT. ChatGPT has access to all of my files and some tools, and then it comes back to me, right? But I still have the agency, right? And I'm choosing in that instance to give decision-making power temporarily to an AI agent. So that's not, to a large language model, but that's not an agent. So me talking to ChatGPT, that's not an agent. Me talking to ChatGPT that has access to my files, that's an AI workflow. That's not an agent. An agent is when it doesn't need me. I go in one time, I go to Microsoft Copilot Studio as an example. I set up an autonomous agent. It sets on a trigger. Anytime I receive this type of email, people asking me for a quote, I don't do that anymore, right? Like it's going to go through. It realizes, yes, this is someone reaching out, asking about a quote. It goes and looks at all your dynamic data, all your most up-to-date information, across multiple parts of your organization. And then it goes back and it can reply to that email automatically. That's agency. That's an agent, right? That's when you set up the guardrails. And a large language model has tools. It has a defined role, and it goes out without you telling it to, without you handing over that agency or asking it to be agentic. It's working on its own. And that's where we're at. And I do think, unfortunately, once companies see and realize the gains of this combination of agentic AI, number one, models that are much smarter and models that are reasoning, number two, and costs going down, unfortunately, that means a lot of big companies are going to be laying people off. But ultimately, what I think that means is there's going to be first, and I talked about this on our 2025 AI roadmap prediction series, there's going to be a huge disruption in traditional service industries. Okay. Slow, expensive sectors are going to be rocked. Okay. I'm talking about consulting, finance, legal, tech writing, accounting, CPAs, right? High priced, slow, expensive services, they're going to get crushed, right? Check in the newsletter. We're going to be covering, I can't talk about this because they did release this information before the embargo. Google just updated its deep research tool to Gemini 2.5 Pro, right? I think OpenAI's Deep Research is one of the more impressive AI tools I've ever used. Google did update theirs a couple of weeks ago to Gemini 2.0. Now that it's Gemini 2.5 Pro, I've only used it because it just got released like last night, and been a little busy here at Google Cloud Next. That's going to be extremely disruptive. I don't see, if I'm being honest, right? So let me just give an example here. Let's say right now there's 1,000 consultancies in the US. I know that's not the right number. I know there's more, but I'm here for easy math. It's still 6 a.m. here, local time. Okay, let's say there's 1,000 consultancies. I think half of them are going to persist with their traditional business models, right? They're going to keep charging an asinine price. They're going to be saving a lot of time because these deep research tools, there's a reason why when OpenAI launched their deep research, they partnered with Bain, right? One of the biggest consulting firms in the world. And you go look at that little case study and it's like, oh, okay, yeah. Like you can see that deep research tool can do the work of a junior, probably better and exponentially faster. So what happens then? Are these consulting firms going to continue to charge the same amount they're charging, right? If an AI tool can get 80% of the work done in 10% of the time, okay? So I think half of them will. They'll continue to do business as normal, whether they are outwardly communicating that they're using these new deep research tools, which is essentially a consultant, but better, faster, more accurate. Sorry to my friends in consulting. I already came to that realization myself. ChatGPT is a better, faster writer than me. Okay. If you're in the consulting industry, now OpenAI's deep research, Google's deep research, even Microsoft announced theirs. Within a month or two, once they've worked out the kinks, it's going to be better than most consultants. Okay. So out of those 1,000 consultancies, I see half of them continuing to go on with traditional methods. And I think that they're eventually, by doing that, they're going to lose the top and bottom 20% of clients. All right. Because the top 20%, they're going to know, and they're going to have their own essentially internal consultancies spinning up. And they're going to be like, all right, we don't need to pay this big four company 8 figures a year anymore. We're cutting that. And then they're going to lose the bottom 20% of clients, right? So those smaller businesses where normally hiring a big four is a huge expense and it's painful, but they feel they must, they're not going to do it either. So these big consultancies, I think they're going to lose the top 20% and the bottom 20% of their clientele over the next 2 years. And that's going to cause massive layoffs because they're going to get crushed, right? The other half, I think, are going to do it the right way. They're going to adjust their prices. They're going to provide better, faster, and more accurate services, right? You're not going to have to go on a quarter-long, 7-figure endeavor with some of these big-name consulting companies anymore, because they'll realize, okay, if we want to stick around this in the long term, right? You're seeing all these stories now. The big four consulting companies aren't hiring as much anymore because I think they're starting to understand that this is a threat to their traditional way of doing business, right? So what I think, half of those, so again, easy math, 500 are going to have massive layoffs. 500 are going to pivot and shift their business model. But for those that have massive layoffs, what's going to happen is you have very smart people that are going to be out of a job. What are they going to do? They're going to crush their competitor. They're going to crush their previous employer. Because they're going to know, oh, wow, we're using AI and, we're just, pocketing the profit. Let's come in. Let's do the same thing. Let's go steal these clients and let's charge them 10%. Let's charge them 10% of what that they were doing at the big four, the big 8, whatever, right? And I'm not trying to call you guys out. I know we have listeners there, so hopefully you all aren't mad at me for saying this, but this is the truth. You're going to have consultancies spin up that are going to be 10% of the price. It's going to be the same people that were working there. And it's going to be faster. It's going to be better because they're going to leverage AI and they're going to do what I like to call expertise in the loop. I think we need to stop talking about human in the loop. I just had a great conversation with someone last night from Gartner, actually on the shuttle ride back from the Sphere, which was a fun event. Google announced, they're kind of like remaking with AI with their VO tools and or VEO tools and others. They're kind of remaking the Wizard of Oz with AI. To fit on the Sphere big screen, which was pretty cool. So I was having a conversation with a researcher from Gartner on the way back about this very thing, and just how I think we're going to see hundreds and probably thousands of hyper niche consulting services. So now apply that same scenario, applied across legal. Legal's going to get hit hard. Financial services, CPA, accounting, etc. That's what's going to happen. We're going to see a huge disruption in traditional service industries. All right. Yeah. Douglas saying consultants could be some of the $20,000 a month access to OpenAI service that have been referenced. Yeah. That's a good point, Douglas. Yeah, there's always these rumors out that all these big tech companies are working on these versions of their models that are going to cost thousands of dollars a month. So yeah, maybe there is something much better. Obviously, OpenAI did announce that we're going to see an O3 full. We're going to see an O4 mini soon. So I do assume that their deep research tools are going to get updated because Google's that they just announced. And looking at some early benchmarks, it's extremely impressive. Yeah, Monica saying, I already see on LinkedIn people leaving huge companies and high-level positions to start their own businesses in their specialty. That's a great point. And I'm not going to name names, right? But I've had many conversations. Many people reach out to me and I'm like, hey, Jordan, I'm at a big company, companies you all have heard of, right? And they're like, I know I can go out and start my own thing. And that's going to happen a lot. And that's why, my kind of point number 3, kind of the impact on future employment. I don't think traditional full-time U.S. employment is going to look the same because of this very reason, right? And I don't think it's wild to think that people are going to spin off and they're going to have multiple, right? They might have 2 or 3 of their own businesses that they own and they provide services, and then they might be, kind of freelancing for 5 to 10 more. I think that's going to be it's going to be very common. Just like I said, it's common for maybe your Uber driver to also do TaskRabbit and to also do I don't know, I forget, DoorDash, right? So it's very common for someone that's already in this gig industry to do 2, 3, 4, 5, and I think it's going to be the same. Knowledge workers, with 15 years of experience in corporate America, highly educated. They're going to be doing this exact same thing. All right, let's go to 5. This one's tough, if I'm being honest. Again, these are, some of the highlights of my first 500 shows. And, it goes without saying, or maybe I should say it. I've obviously got to speak with some of the smartest people in AI. So these aren't just my thoughts, right? That's the fun thing about having a podcast. I can just say, I can open my email, and any given week I have a couple dozen people pitching to come on the podcast, and I can be like, who do I want to steal knowledge from today, right? Who do I want to I want to get some secrets from someone, and I want to share those AI secrets with everyone else. So I've been lucky enough to kind of steal some secrets and absorb knowledge from people across all different industries, huge tech trillionaire companies to startups to medium enterprise businesses. But one of the biggest things that I see is redefining human skill and value. And that's going to be tough, right? I think it's going to be especially tough if you are in like the 30 to 50-year-old range right now. If you're younger, maybe you grew up on the tail end of ChatGPT, or, if you're still in college, I think it's going to be a little easier. If you're more closer to retirement, I don't think this is going to impact you as well. But, for the most part, for 30 plus years, the way that business has worked here in the US, you get paid for what you know, right? And then you have to be able to sit in front of a computer and you have to make your company more money based on what you know. It's not going to be like that. It's not going to be like that anymore. It's weird, right? And the more smart people I talk to about this exact thing, sometimes the harder it is for me to even grasp it, right? But I mean, let me just talk about even myself, right? So my skills, right? So I've been working full time since when I was 16 or 17. So more than 20 years I've been working full time. And for the most part, those have been in roles like, I was a writer, strategist, marketer, advertiser, etc. So let's just say um, digital marketing, advertising, writing, etc. My skills don't matter there anymore. They don't. It matters in a different way. It's almost like I think that many of us are going to become tastemakers in very niche ways. I don't know if that makes sense. But now, as an example, even what I do, right? Yes, I still sit down and I write my newsletter. But aside from that, for all those other things, I'm using AI, and so doing jobs that I used to do, right? Even researching, I used to spend so much time researching, and as a former journalist, I really valued my my researching and analytical skills. I'm a tastemaker now. So what that means is I hand that job off. I give agency to go do that research, to go be the creative strategist to multiple large language models. And then essentially it's like, oh, I have them report back to me. I am a curator and I am a tastemaker in terms of my skills for things that I've been doing for 20 years, right? So hey, different AI models, go out and write this. Hey, different AI models, go put together a strategy plan on this. Hey, different AI models, I need new advertising. Here's all the data. Here's our results. Go out and work. Go do this. And then they come back to me. I curate, and it's almost like I taste make, right? I'm like, okay, this is good. This is passing. This is passing the vibe check. This isn't, right? So I think as we look at where our skills are, because here's the thing, that thing that you've been getting paid to do for 10 years, in most cases, if you haven't already found the AI tool or the large language model that does it better, you will very soon. And a lot of times it's just going from the piece to the system, right? And that's this phase of generative AI that we're in right now, right? So from large language model going to AI workflow, going to agentic AI, going to multi-agentic AI, right? With huge context windows, with RAG, right? With up-to-date dynamic data. So I'm not saying your skills are useless. You're just going to be using them in a different way, right? So hopefully that example where I used to physically go right? I still do that, but a lot of times for some things, AI is doing it. I'm still getting my input in on the front end. For some things, I used to be the digital strategist. Not anymore, right? I used to be the marketer. Not anymore. It looks a little different now, right? Because unfortunately, the business world in the US, it's make more money in less time, right? It's especially if you work at a public company. Sad. It's sad to think about. We are a head count. Companies will fire you tomorrow. Doesn't matter if you're a director of blah, 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 or senior manager of important project. Doesn't matter. As soon as that board, and they're looking at the stock price and they're like, oh, look, when we use AI, this sector of our business is bringing in so much money and this sector isn't. They don't care about it. They don't, right? I'd hate to be that person. Unfortunately, in America, corporate greed is at an all-time high. I did a show on that. It was actually very telling, right? How much executives at these large, Fortune 500 companies make, and when they see, oh, when we can, implement AI, multi-agentic AI in this way, we can cut, 20% of that department and still make more money. They're going to do it. They don't care about you. They don't care about your experience. They don't care about your background. So that's why I think it's important that we start to redefine are not just human skills, but also our value, right? And I kind of shared a little bit with you all about what that was like for me. It was weird. It was weird when I saw all these different AI tools that could be a better writer than me, could be a better digital strategist than me, could be a better marketer than me, could be a better advertiser than me, could be a better researcher than me. It's weird. You're going to run into that, right? But hopefully you can hit it head on, right? Because I think we do, we've kind of traditionally hung our hats on a job title, right? It's like, you meet someone new and they're like, hey, I'm a marketing director. Oh, okay. Well, wasn't asking about that, right? But people place so much of their identity in their job title. And I think that you have to be willing to pivot from that, right? And relook at what your human skills are and what your value is as a human, right? There's great, deep podcasts on this, sometimes it's people that maybe, like, okay, Bill Gates, right? He's had some great podcast topics on this. Obviously he's, different than all of us, but just even him talking about, okay, well, what do we do in the future? What's human purpose, right? When AI is more powerful, maybe when we, tiptoe toward this artificial general intelligence, artificial super intelligence. So I think you really have to, I love using the term unlearn. It's a term I think I coined it. I didn't hear anyone else talking about it. People are talking about upskilling and reskilling, but I think for this, we have to redefine human skills, human values. So you need to, if you haven't already, develop AI literacy. That's why I do this every day. You can join me for, I know sometimes these podcasts go a little longer. This is my 500th show, y'all. I'm not going to make this a 20-minute one. But you need to practice it every day. You need to learn. Because ultimately, I think what a lot of us are doing, instead of sitting in front of a computer, creating business value with our fingers and with our brains, I mean, we're still going to be doing that, but AI and agentic AI is going to be doing the heavy lifting. All right. Number 6. I got 2 more, y'all. 2 or 3 more. Human in the loop. I already talked about this, but I really think active human engagement in AI orchestration is going to be big. I really want to Control-Alt-Delete, Command-A-Delete every time someone talks about human in the loop. I think it's dangerous, right? When we don't really explore what that means, right? And maybe you're new to AI, maybe you're tuning in for the first or second time. You're like, okay, what's human in the loop, right? This is one of those like blanket terms people say to kind of give everyone ease. It's like, oh, well, is it weird to be handing all this out to large language models and agentic AI? And they're like, don't worry, human in the loop, right? That's going to keep us safe. No, it's not. Because I think human in the loop, it's a problem because number one, you have thousands of companies promoting, agentic AI is the best thing since sliced bread. Also, with sliced bread like that big of a deal, sometimes I just love getting a hunk of French bread and just biting into it. I don't need to slice it. Anyways, everyone's like, oh, agentic AI, right? So as business leaders, making decisions on, what tools and models your company should be using, all you're seeing is agentic AI, and you're like, don't worry, human in the loop, you're safe. Guardrails, your data, ethics, human in the loop, right? What's that mean? To me, I don't think, these thousands of companies trying to push us agentic software necessarily care about human in the loop, right? It's more of like it's a warm blanket on a cold day. It's not fixing anything. It's just making you feel better about the exterior situation. I really think we need to pivot to talking, just like we shouldn't be talking about upskilling and reskilling. We need to talk about unlearning. That's what you have to do. We also need to talk about expertise in the loop. Human in the loop, I think people are looking at it as passive. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to read the prompt. Let me check in on the agents. Good job, agents. All right. I'm going to sit here and sip my coffee. I'm the human in the loop, right? I'm on an assembly line, making sure the assembly line doesn't break. That's not it. Expertise in the loop, right? Organizations need to be sticking the right expertise in this agentic AI loop. And I talked a little bit about AI orchestration. So if you're interested in that, go back and listen to our 2025 AI roadmap series where I did have some dedicated things on agent orchestration, but I don't think that's going to happen this year completely. I do think that we're going to see, roles being created at large companies. I've already seen it, where someone's role is essentially an agent orchestrator, right? And they're essentially overseeing agentic systems. But we need expertise in the loop because as we hand off more and more agency, that's what we're going through right now in 2025. And that's one of the biggest takeaway over 500 shows is we're giving more and more agency. This generative AI wave started as like, oh, this little program, this AI chatbot is fun, right? And now we're at the point where organizations are trying to offload as much of their manual knowledge, human work as possible. So it's different now. We need to be intentional about sticking expertise in the loop. And that's not just someone who's, a great prompt engineer or a technical person. It's security. Make sure you stick your expertise in that loop, right? Don't let one person, don't let a generalist oversee a multi-agentic AI operation, right? You need multiple people. So I do think that's another way how our human engagement in our roles are going to change is we are going to have expertise in the same way, right? Like, oh, you have your people, they check in on your CRM, you have your project managers, they're checking in on the projects. I think they're all just going to shift now, right? You're going to have these agentic loops performing a lot of these manual knowledge-based tasks that are hopefully fine-tuned on your data, but that's what it's going to turn into. All right, 2 more quick ones, and I'm going to get to your questions. If you do have anything, any questions, please let me know. Some of these comments are making me laugh, y'all. This is funny. All right, number 7, the AI race. It's exciting, right? It's one of the top takeaways. You all wanted the top takeaways. The AI race is exciting, right? I'm a Chicago guy. Growing up, watching the '90s Bulls was an unworldly experience, right? No one could compete with the '90s Bulls, right? The 2 3-peats, MJ, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, no one could compete when that group was together. I know that they kind of swapped out characters there between the 2 different 3-peats. No one could compete with them. A couple months ago, I would have said that's how the AI race is going. Maybe, I don't know, maybe like October, I would have said OpenAI they're the '90s Bulls, right? They're running away with this. No one can touch them. Google and Microsoft have made things very interesting, right? I'm fine saying this. I'm literally partnering with Google. I'm at Google Cloud Next. A year and a half ago, I told people, don't use Google Gemini. No, don't. That started to change, in quarter 3 and quarter 4 of last year. I think Google made some great hires. They made some great restructuring. I think bringing Gemini under DeepMind was probably a good call. And now Google's right up there. Using Gemini 2.5 Pro, it's such a weird experience, right? As someone that uses large language models way too much, it is baffling how powerful that new model is from Google. And then Microsoft as well. Microsoft has slid under the radar. I don't know how, with a lot of their recent Copilot announcements, right? Last Friday at their 50th anniversary celebration, they just announced like 7, like essentially I called it like a greatest hits. They like, I don't know if this is what happened internally, right? But they saw all these other, popular AI modes, and they're like, yeah, let's just go ahead and release that for Copilot, right? Oh, like Notebook LM, right? Where you can put all your information and it's going to create you a customized podcast. Yeah, we're going to do that for Copilot. Oh, deep research. Yeah, we're going to release that, right? Microsoft went a little bonkers. We're going to get a lot more announcements today at Google Cloud as well. But what I'm saying is like the AI race, it's actually a race now. Whereas, like I said, maybe 9 months ago, so for the better part of 18 months, it was just the Bulls dynasty. No one could touch them. It was not close. It's close now, right? Which actually makes it a little more difficult, I think, for all of us, for business users, right? I talk sometimes about you need to choose your AI operating system. That choice was a lot easier 9 months ago. And sometimes you might have to use multiple, but it is extremely competitive, which I think is both exciting and also frightening, right? Because now, the race toward, right? You have a lot of these companies now openly working toward artificial super intelligence, right? And that can be scary. And I get that, right? So, I guess if Microsoft and Google hadn't quote unquote caught up to OpenAI, as business leaders, it could have made the AI adoption and the AI transformation journey a little less stressful, right? But now, both fortunately and unfortunately, I think we have three major players that are on that like first tier. And I think now you have to constantly be evaluating the quality of these models for your domain, right? So I think it's always a good start to look at the kind of like quote unquote scientific benchmarks, right? To look at the MMLU and the MMU, the diamond, all those things, and then the human preference as well. So the ELO scores, on the LM chatbot arena. But I think also companies, if you haven't already, you need to start developing your own domain-specific, company-specific evals, right? So it could be as simple as 100 different quote unquote prompts, or 100 different tasks, right? And as we talk about what happens when you start gaining time back. Well, this is what you need. You need an evals team, and this is going to be one of your busiest teams in your organization. They need to be constantly manually running those 100 tests, those 100 use cases through these models on a weekly basis, and doing your own quote unquote internal evals, right? Because the large language models themselves are becoming commoditized, right? You can there's systems pretty easily. If you're working on the API side, you can swap a model out fairly easily. So you have to understand what all the major players are doing. You have to know how to evaluate them all internally in order to keep up. All right. I'm going to tackle a couple of these questions. So thanks for getting them in. And I have one more thing to wrap up. I'm going to end on a personal note, if that's okay with you guys. So Melissa says, what's the most impressive or game-changing AI development you've experienced to date? Oh, Melissa, that's a tough question. I've talked about this. I never had the ChatGPT moment. When ChatGPT came out, I was like, meh. I think at the time their GPT technology was being better used and better utilized by third-party people. So ChatGPT, that wasn't it for me. If I'm being honest, I would say Notebook LM was probably one of them. I'm still astonished at the team that puts that together. I'll also say OpenAI's deep research, which now might be Google's. I'll have to see. I would say those are probably some of the most impressive. But again, I don't impress easily, I guess. Also, GPT-4o image gen, that just came out, very impressive. Jackie is asking, have you switched to Android? Not yet. I don't like. Jackie, you probably know I can't text. if any of you guys ever like text me or DM me, I can't do anything on my phone. So that's one reason why I'm still on a Mac, is just so I can text people on my computer a little faster. Brian, Brian's been showing up for like 2 years. You're awesome. Brian's asking, what are you most excited about from an AI perspective over the next 6 months? Oh gosh, that's a good question. I'm most excited about non-technical people finally discovering what the rest of us have been doing for the past, year or two. That's honestly what I'm most excited for, because then it makes education a little bit easier, right? Companies hire us a lot to train their employees, and whether it's a dozen or hundreds, and it's difficult. It's difficult to go train someone on generative AI, right? When I go into a room with 100 people, and a third of them use generative AI for 3 hours a day, and a third of them have never done it. So I'm personally, like, maybe that's a cop out. I'm personally excited for people that haven't used generative AI to start using it and to start discovering it, because what that happens is, it's like, oh, it raises the tide for all ships, right? It does. And I think, so many organizations have been limited on the top side, just because it's like such a high percentage of their organization doesn't know what generative AI is. They don't know how it works. Another good question here: any suggestions on how to get late adapters to embrace and see the value of Gen AI? I think a lot of it, I kind of gave the example of my wife, right? I'm always telling her like, oh, hey, this, and bless her for like still, listening to me, 2 years later, talk about AI. But for her, I think she needed AI in her personal life, right? I think, it's like quite literally hands full, talk to Perplexity. And she's like, oh, wow. And now I think, I don't want to speak for her, but I think maybe she'll think a little bit differently. And I think this is just more in general. When people find value of AI personally, and, give them a couple of months, then it's just going to change their brain, right? It is this unlearning process. So I think that for late adapters, right, it's not like, all right, let's sit down in Microsoft Copilot Studio and we're going to no code your job away. No, it's like, hey, oh, what's that? You have 3 kids and it's hard to get a meal schedule because, one is allergic to peanuts, one only eats peanut butter, and, the other one hasn't touched a vegetable. And, okay, use ChatGPT to meal plan, right? Like, talk to it, right? So I think when business leaders who are still not using generative AI, you can't continue to fight the battle on the same battlefield, right? They need to get it at home. And I think that's what we're starting to see a lot in 2025, strangely enough. All right, let me just double check. Any more questions before I wrap this thing up? All right, good one here from CM on YouTube, saying, how will the new economies work in practice? If white collar workers don't have jobs, how will they pay for the people who do the manual work? I'm trying to imagine how the new systems will work. Yeah, I don't know. This is why, and I did say this in my 2025 AI prediction and roadmap series. I do think UBI, I don't think it's going to happen, universal basic income, but I think it's going to actually be a common discussion now, right? Especially with how the U.S. economy is headed right now. So I don't know. What I will say to this question is, I think, like I said, I think full-time 9-to-5 employment in 10 years is going to look a little antiquated, right? And when I said that the first time, like a year and a half ago, I think people thought I was weird. And then the LinkedIn CEO said something similar, and now people are like, oh, okay, yeah, that adds up, right? Saying, hey, traditional 9-to-5, it's not going to work in the future of AI. It's just not. It's not going away, right? But I do think a lot of people, are going to have multiple side hustles. They're going to have multiple companies. They're going to have multiple freelancing opportunities, right? I do think that's how it works, right? Obviously, there's still going to be, I think the majority of U.S. workers are still going to have 9 to 5 jobs, but not by a lot, right? Now it's like, okay, I look around at everyone I know. It's like, okay, 99% of everyone is either a full-time worker or, raising kids, and their spouse is a full-time worker. I don't think it's going to be like that in 5 years. Maybe it's going to be 60%. Maybe it's going to be 70%. I don't know, but it is hard to tell. All right, let me wrap this thing up here. I just want to end by talking a little bit personally. If I'm being honest, I started this show a little selfishly. I kind of started it almost for myself. I did not envision it would become this, this time intensive, right? Maybe I should have listened to my wife and my friend on that drive that one day when they're like, "Are you sure you want to do this every day?" Right? But for me, and at least where my skill sets were, I knew my skill sets were some first to go, right? Writing and marketing and advertising and some of those things. I'm like, this is low hanging fruit, even though at the time my agency had the best month we had ever have. I'm like, this isn't going to stick around for too long, right? We weren't a multi-million-dollar, organization with hundreds of employees. We're small. I did not envision that everyday AI would turn into what it's turned into. But selfishly, I did start it for me, but I started it probably for you, right? Because I was able to go through that process in 2020, 2021 of learning AI. And I'm like, this sucks. This is hard. And I'm like, this is my background, right? I was a journalist. I interview people. I talk to people. I tell stories, right? And I've been in, different, MarTech comms roles for 20 years. I'm like, from 2020 to 2022, I feel I at least figured it out, right? I got from a 0 to a 5. So I wanted to selfishly get from a 5 to a 6, 5 to a 7. So I'm like, all right, let me start this everyday AI thing. Maybe it'll fail. Maybe it'll go for, 2 months and no one will care and I'll stop. I'm glad I didn't, because here we are 500 episodes later, partnering with Google. I've had partnerships with Microsoft and NVIDIA and Adobe, some of the biggest brands in the world. So I'm very, very lucky and fortunate and feel blessed and a big sense of gratitude to you all for tuning in. How the heck are there still, all of you people? I'm rambling, I'm an hour 10 in. So thank you all. But I also did start this for you, right? There's a reason why, our domain is Your Everyday AI. I mean, number one, everydayai.com was not available when I started this thing, but I do want this to be yours, right? So as I look at the future, like, will we have another 500 episodes? I don't know. Maybe not, right? I'm a human. I'm tired. Personally, I am tired. I am exhausted. This is hard. This is hard work. Yeah, this is hard work. I don't sleep a lot. I miss out on a lot, which, man, bless up. My wife, she's amazing. So if you've benefited from everyday AI, say thanks, Jordan's wife. I'm lucky. I get to show up, click go live at 7:30 a.m. Central, and hopefully it helps you. And I know it has, because I've literally heard from hundreds of you that have left testimonials, and I read them all and hear those stories. But it's, personally, this is a lot for it's been a lot for me to take on, and I feel sometimes I fall short, but I think that's reflective of probably how everyone feels about AI, right? Because it's like, hey, no matter how much I try, it feels like I'm always falling behind. It feels like, as soon as I got this AI implementation going in my department, it seems antiquated now, right? There's all these new things and it's hard, right? Succeeding in today's business with the pace of AI is difficult. So, I just personally, I wanted to thank you all. Um, and my wife, she's amazing. Like what she's able to do behind the scenes to, because let's be honest, I intentionally knew I wasn't going to make a dime off this thing in the first year, and I could have, right? There's a lot of people, as the show started to grow a little, and they reached out, and they're like, oh, I want to, pay you, and I'll give you money, and I'm going to put my product on your podcast, and I'm like, no, your product stinks, right? So it was very hard for me to not make a dime, right? Not make a dime from this endeavor. Yes, I still have my other business. We still have clients, but I spend the majority of my time on everyday AI, and I had so many opportunities, to monetize this thing. So maybe I could sleep a little more, right? Maybe I could be a little more present in my personal life. But I didn't want, essentially, right? Even it's hard to say no to money when you're starting something, right? I didn't want to bring on, advertisers, and, for you all, if I've gained your trust, I didn't want you to start using these things and then it's like, okay, 6 months later, they're gone. Okay, Jordan, why did you bring this little AI startup? And, I trusted you, and, I got my company on board, and now this thing went under. Right. So it's been extremely hard to do this 500 straight Monday through Fridays. Right. So first of all, I wanted to thank you all. Your words of encouragement, sticking with these rambling podcasts, but I hope they're helpful in some regards. Like I said, I feel so much information now about AI, just information in general. It's robotic, right? Everyone uses the same formula. It's copy and paste. That's not me. I'm real. I want to be able to tell you when something's good, when something's bad, when something's hard, when something's easy. And this hasn't been, 500 episodes hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. So, I do want to thank, all of you, our partners, at places like Google, Microsoft, Adobe, NVIDIA, that's obviously been helpful to work with big brands. All of you that have supported me, sometimes it's just like one little comment, I'll have a bad show, and, at the bottom, I'll say someone that I've never seen before, right? They're like, I've been listening for, a year and a half, and this show was so helpful, right? Because sometimes I'm like, man, I put in 8 hours of prep for this one show, and I bombed it, and, and it sucked, right? And then someone's like, hey, I got tons of value out of this, and I went back to my company, and we were very uncertain in this area, and now we're certain. So thank you for that. I don't know. What do you guys want for the next 500 episodes? I don't know if I can do this. We'll see. I'm not getting any younger. I wouldn't encourage everyone to go back and, screenshot maybe me from 2 years ago. I've probably aged like 20 years. It's been fun. It's been an adventure. So my top takeaway, I'm grateful for you all. I'm grateful to my wife, to everyone who's shown support out there at all. So thank you for tuning in to 500 episodes. If you haven't already, please go to youreverydayai.com. I don't know how I'm going to wrap this one up, but I'm going to do it anyways in our daily newsletter. So thank you all for all of your support for Everyday AI. I hope to see you back tomorrow and every day for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.